start, the first thing that we create is the first thing that we create is action types. What actions we are going to execute. So you see that this is also here, like in here also, you will see this action types is defined. So it's the same thing. Then in another file, we create the actions, what actions we are going to take. Okay. Then you also define the reducer. Okay, so in here also you'll see this action types reducer is there. Apart from these three files, you can also keep a file for flags if you have some kind of status flags, and you can also keep a file for constants if you're using any kind of constants that you want to import. Then you can also keep that. Apart from that, you can also keep a middleware here, and I'll talk about middleware, what it means. Basically, key got stuck. Oops. Still not stuck. Yeah, so you can also keep, I was talking about middleware. Install launch. Yeah. So the first action that we are going to define anyway is going to be the, so a very like simple action, like we are going to set the data for whatever we are getting. So let's say export constant the set. So this is the action name. So set product data maybe, and we set the product data for that. So this is the only thing. Now what we do in actions is, sorry, we create an object from where we can actually execute that action. So right, so we are going to export a function, let's say set product data, and it's going to take some product data, and this is going to return two things. So I think we have seen a little bit of its implementation in the use reducer. So it will return the type. The type is going to be import star as action types, action types, and use this types, and yeah, the constant that we created, and the payload for what this action constitutes. is going to be our product data. That's all. Now our action and action types is done. Now coming to the reducer. Now what is reducer going to contain? Two things. One is the reducer function and the other one is going to be the initial state of what our reducer is going to hold. Okay. So, sorry, not initial state, we will not define it here. We will define it someplace else. Here we will only define a reducer. Okay. So let's create a reducer. It's going to be function, call it a reducer. And as we said, reducer takes two parameters. One is a state and the other one is the action. What we want, what action that we want to execute. Okay, so we are going to switch between action dot types. Now the first case is going to be, first let's import all the actions here. Import as action types from if the action type is going to be set product data, then what we are going to do is we are going to return state with the product data been set to action.payload. Okay, so and I also said that this reducer functions are always pure functions, which means that it should always return something. Okay, so you also have to give the default case, like what happens if none of the case matches, then in that case you can give a default case in which it is simply going to return the state. Just export this from here. And that's all. So that's all for the reducer section. Now we are going to create a context. Okay. Now in the context, now this is one place where I want you to pay a little bit of attention, because action types reducer you might have seen in when we were using the use reducer hook and stuff. Yeah. But so in the context, what we are going to do, the first thing that we have to do, so why do we use the context API? For two things. One is to get the global data and the other one is to send the global data. So we need to do both of them. Okay, so accordingly, we have to create, like if you remember in my last video that I showed you, I was wrapping the content of the parent component with the context API components. And I told you that all the child components of that component will have access to the data that is stored, that is provided through the context API dot provider, right? So here now in our case, we just don't want the data. We also want to update the data, right? So that is something that we are going to create a generic component and accordingly we are going to use it. So let's create this file, the main file, which is index.js. In here, the first thing that we are going to do from here, okay, first let's import the React that is like given. And we also require the reducer. So we import reducer from reducer. Okay. The first thing that we are going to do with me is define the initial state. Initial state, which is the initial state of the what is in the global state I'm talking about, and it is just going to contain the product data, which is going to be an array. Okay, now we create a context. Okay, so export the constant. So we are going to create two contexts. One will be to get the data and other one will be to dispatch any action and accordingly update the state. Okay, so we are going to say one is going to be product state context goes to create context, and the other one is going to be product dispatch context. Okay. Now now we are going to what we are going to do is like when we will be using this context, okay, we want the whatever component we are passing into it, we want it to wrap it with the product state and product dispatch context. So that is something that we are going to do. The first is we will, let's say, we write it as product context, function product context, and whatever children or the child component, you can write it as child component. Whatever child component is passed to it. Okay. What we are going to do, what we are going to return here is we are going to return the child component. Okay. So this will be the child component, but we need to wrap it in the admin. Sorry, not admin, I mean product state context, and we need to provide it a value. So provider will be, I mean, the value is going to be the global state. So, and that global state is going to be, okay, so global state. Yeah, so how we are going to get the state here? It's going to, so because we will be using a reducer to update the state. So let's define a reducer also. So let's use the constant state. We get return state and dispatch. If you remember the use reducer hook, use reducer. Yeah. So yeah, it will is so we need to pass the reducer to it and the initial state to it, right? So this is going to give you the global state that we will be passing in. So we just copy it from here and paste it here. So that's one thing. The other thing we also want it to happen is to wrap it in the product dispatch context, right? Because from here what we are going to do is we are going to dispatch the object. So whatever, so the other method, that the variable that's returned by the use reducer, will pass it here, and we just copy this and we paste it here. Okay, and that's what we are going to return from here. So now so this is all fine. So whatever we like, we are going to, wherever we are going to use it, we are going to wrap it in the product context. But I also want to create a kind of a custom hook from where I can directly get the state and directly get the dispatch method, right? So for that, I create two additional functions. One will be use product state. So this is a custom kind of hook. You can think of it like that. Use product state. So what we are going to do is constant context is equal to, if you remember how we use the use context hook, and we will be checking for the product state context. Now, if let's say the context that is passed to it, if context is undefined, then we will throw some error that yeah, so product, so the product sorry, use product state should be used within a the product state provider. And if that's not the case, then we simply return the context from here. And similarly, we do it for the use product dispatch. We create another hook. Am I, yeah, I'm unmuted. Use product dispatch. So we create the context from here. We use context, product dispatch context. Now this is something you can copy directly. The same thing is going to be here. The only thing is that use product dispatch provider. Now the last thing that we have to do is to export these functions because we have to use them. So we export the product context from here. We export the use product state from here, and we export the use product dispatch from here. Okay, so our creating the context is now complete. All we have to do is whichever component we are using, we will simply pass this. So let's do that. Since this is the parent component, I'll just import it here. Import product context from context, and all I have to do is just wrap it with here. Okay, so now all the things like everything within the home and all its child elements will be able to access the data, whatever our context provides. Okay, now comes to the real implementation, which is the API call. So the API call, for API call, we will follow something like very similar to what we have done. We will create another folder called service. Okay, you can call it service v1 if you have like different versions of APIs going on, like v1 v2, then you can segregate it there. Now if you see in here, you will have something called a service. Yeah, this one. So product details v1 is here, and in the index.tx we are going to create the API. So I have already explained this to you when we were doing the what we were doing yeah, when we were doing the Axios. So, and I'm going to use the same API. So I'll just copy all the details from here. I'll not copy this get product details from here. I'll tell you why. But I'll copy this first part and I'll come here and okay. So here, if you don't remember, I'm just giving you a recap of what we did. Um, So we created an API, we gave the base URL, we gave the parameters, whatever was there. Then we gave some headers where required, like the API key and the hostname. So I've given that. And this is like just a mock API. You can also use the Postman to hit it. Postman is not open, otherwise I can show you. Okay, let me show you Postman only. I created this API using the Rapid API. So Rapid API is a kind of a, what I can say, it's a Yeah, it's a platform where you can create custom mock APIs to mock your data. And yeah, so these are the parameters that we were giving uh, in our here we were defining it here. Then in the header section, you will see that X API, Rapid API key, and host are given. The rest of the header sections, you don't have to, these are like automatically added by Postman. And yeah, and the base URL is this one that you have to give. Okay. And whatever parameters you will give here, okay, it will automatically append it to your API. I mean, this part. Okay, so this is what we did, and now we have exported it. Now what we want is, in our context, we'll create a folder called middleware. And there's a good reason to do that, because basically whenever you make an API call, you use for managing the state and others, you use some sort of middleware. There are multiple things available, like you have Redux Thunk or you have Sagas. Okay, so you generally use that. We will not use any fancy middleware, it's not required here. But yeah, but if we in the future decide that we are going to use some fancy middleware in between, then in that case, obviously, this folder structure would be better. So in the middleware section, I'll just write index.js. Inside this index.js, we are going to call the function. Now the function call is going to be very simple. We just copy this one from here. Okay. And this is going to use the product list API. So I'll import it. Import product. Okay, I think, yeah, product list API from the service section. Oops. Yeah. So now we have the function ready. Now in here we have the response, or maybe I can write it for you line by line, so I can explain it to you line by line what's happening. So first thing is we are going to define a function which is going to be get product details. But as I said, that this function is not going to be a simple function. I mean, it is going to execute, because it's going to execute asynchronously. There is a network call involved, and therefore we are not going to go to the next, come to the next control without actually caring about what the previous control was. In other words, we are not going to come from line 4 to 5. Okay, because in the line 4, let's say there will be some API call that will happen, and then we have to wait for that API call to complete, and then only we can come back. So in here we cannot do like that. So obviously we are going to work with promises, but as I said that better, instead of promises we can use the async await. It also works the same way as promises. The only difference is that we can write our code in a sequential fashion. I think I have discussed this in one of our previous sessions. So I think you might be familiar with async await. So whatever response we are going to get, let's response, and we define the error message in case we get any error, and then we execute a try. So and in that case, if we get any error, then we capture that error. Okay, so we have console log here. And inside this try method, we let the response here, and we are going to await, wait for the response to happen. And we're going to get a list here. So we pass that parameter. And we are going to simply return once it happens. We are going to simply return the response. That's all. So yeah, very simple. Now, yeah, now let's come to our home page. and let's do the integration. Okay, this is our home page. We don't have to call it from here. Maybe we can call it from the app.js. Right. So what we are going to do. So as you remember, I told you that any API call is a side effect. So we have to handle that side effect. So in our case, like the use case is something like as soon as our app loads, so we are going to call the API and get the data, right? So for that, we pass the dependency array as like empty. Okay. And then here we use the get product details API to essentially get the data. Okay. And once this completes, we have to wait for the, I mean, um, yeah. So we have to wait for, you have to basically call a, kind of a function in order to set the global state and the local state also. Constant set state, not state. Uh, Constant, let's say products, set products, and we use state hook. Okay. So when the call is completed, what we want to do is we want to set the products. Okay. So for that we have to get the products. Okay, what we are going to get from here is a response. So we will set the response here. And we are also going to set the global state also. So for that, I'll import use admin, sorry, not admin, use product dispatch from the constant context. And once this is executed, this then, yeah, once this then is executed, then we also, okay, or maybe we don't another then, we can just write it here only. So we will call the use product dispatch. Now the question is what it's going to dispatch, right? It needs to dispatch some action. So we will import that action from there. So the action I think was get product, whatever it was, set product data. We import it here. Sorry, not here. Import from, so it's going to be inside the context and it's going to be in actions. So yeah. So we need to dispatch this action, which is set products. Oops, set product data, and we are going to send the response to him. So in this way, we will be able to set both the global state and the local state from from here. Okay, now the question is how we are going to verify whether this worked. Okay, so we can do a few things. One thing is like we can do a console log here to see if our API call was successful. And we just console log the response. The other thing that we can do is like we can console log here just to know if this action was triggered. It's triggered, and we print the action.payload just to see if we are getting the data. So if we get these two things on the console now, we can be pretty confident that, okay, fine, our API call was successful and we were able to get the data. Let's see. So there are so many changes. It may happen that some of them may not work. Okay, wait. So I copied this service from here, but I think this was not originally there. Think, yeah, in the dependencies, you can clearly see that only React and React DOM is there. So I have to install the Axios also. So let's install it. Install Axios. Okay, for that I have to spend my view. It got stuck. I have to clean the cache. Okay. So now you have Axios installed. Now let's see. I think should work now. Okay. Then right. So as you can see, our API call was successful. This was getting logged here. So where is it? In the app.js. So here we logged API call successful. So and then that came out to be this, and we got the data also. But there seems something which says uncaught in promise error invalid hook call. Hooks can only be called inside of the body of a function component. This could happen for whether you might be mismatching the React version, breaking rules of hook. Okay. Which hook am I calling? Okay, I think I'm calling this use product dispatch hook. I cannot call it from here. Yes, because, okay, fine. So we remove it from here. Let's see if this works. Yeah. So yeah, so since we created a custom hook here in the index.js, which is called use product dispatch, so we cannot call a hook from inside the use effect. Okay, so we have to call it within a function only. So what we can do here is, where is it? App.js. We use constant dispatch, and we use the use product dispatch hook. We get it here, and then here we can, I think, first, okay, one thing is here in the response that we are getting, the data is actually there in the response.data.products. So we have to set that. So set products will be response.data.products. Those products, right? Yeah. And here I can dispatch the method response dot, sorry, the action set product data and pass it response dot data dot products. Okay, now let's see. Okay, use dispatch should be used within the product state. should be used within the product state. Okay, I think so app here, yeah. So we are, since we are in like wrapping it here, we cannot so all the components that are there inside this home is going to get access to the data, but not this particular component, because this is the outside. So that's why we are getting that error. We defined it here in the use product dispatch, that it should be used within the state, within the context. Since the context um, is this one, um, yeah, this one. So the home or this particular part, that's why, and this particular component is outside of that context. That's why we are getting this error. So for that, what we need to do is actually, we should be calling this from our home page. So we just need to move all the things from the app.js to the home page.js. Okay, let's take it from here. Here we just return this, and these things are not required here. So we move from here, we go to home page, we write these things here, and yeah, we also have to import these things. So what was we will be using use effect. Um, we will be using the use state hook also. We will be using import use product dispatch. From context, we will be using the get product details. Also from the middleware, what else are we using? Set products is fine. Dispatch is fine. Set product data. This is from actions. Import set product data from the actions. Yeah, those are the three things we are using. Let's see now. Okay. Network call didn't happen. Okay, so it seems like our a component is not getting injected here, because if you see div id equals to root and there's nothing inside of it. So I think this is not a problem. I think the context perhaps might be initialized, but something is happening in this index.js file. Let's remove the strict mode from here. Not required. It is still not injected. Okay. Only returning the right thing here. Let's remove the in the app.js. Let's remove this context to see if this works out. No, it still doesn't. So it's not a problem with the hook. I think, okay. The use product dispatch should be used within the product state provider. Product should be used within the product state provider. Home page, I think, is mm, yeah, it's fine. Let's remove it for some time just to check if it works that way. Mm, okay. Open. Okay, it comes here. In the console and work, all didn't happen. Oh yeah, it happened. Okay. Yeah, it happened. Right. So our integration with the API is okay, but it seems like there's some issue with the context itself. Okay, let's so we have to check the context file that we created in the context dispatch. Um, yeah, I think that's fine. I think so. The code seems to be correct. We might be missing out somewhere very delicate. Let's see. We can. This is not required here. Or wait, this is in the app. We are not providing it in the app. Then how we are going to get it in the home? Okay, got it. Okay. So all we have to do is import product context here and just mm, yeah, I think that should do the trick. Mm, yeah, the API call is successful. and API call didn't happen. Is it like wrapped somewhere else? So yeah, it's wrapping here. Yeah, fine. Okay, wait, so it's in the reducer, next.js. Where is it? Okay. Why is nothing getting injected into the root when we are using the context? Uh, app.js, we are wrapping it in the product context. That should be okay. So it may be, this shouldn't be an issue, I think. Still, let's see. Yeah, still, the component doesn't get injected. I think it's returning incorrectly. Um, let's do one thing. Let's console log product context and try this home. Let's see what gets returned. React element. Yeah, I think returns correctly. Hmm. Maybe because it's not a default export. Yeah. Mhm. Right. So Mm. Mm. Okay. Right. Mm. Yeah, now we are getting it. Yeah, so the issue was that in the in here, the object that we are going to get is the, this the component, and the component, for the component we are going to access the children aspect of that particular object. Okay, and since we were using the name child component, it was not able to destructure the object. In other words, it was not able to find the key child component within that object. That's why nothing was getting injected into the root. We actually wanted the children component of the parent object. So we destructured it from there. We used it here and then it got injected. Okay. So now you can see that there are two calls. One is this API call successful that was happening from here. If you remember, we did it here in the home page where we called this API. So here we have logged it, API call successful, and this was the response. So this is a direct response from the API that we got, and this action was triggered, which means that in the reducer, this one, in the reducer, this action set product data got triggered, and that's how, and then we set the product data to action.payload. Now the thing with context API is that now from here on, whenever any component like home or even some child component like card or navbar or search bar, if they require the data, they can directly use this, they can directly access the data in this way. They just have to use the import use product state, and then they can use it to a constant state equals to use product state. And then since it's stored in the product, I mean in this product data, so you can directly get the value from here. So just to show you that we are getting the value from here, product 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 data. Yeah. So if you come here to reload this, okay, the card component is not rendered, that's why. So let's take it somewhere else, maybe in the search bar. Here you can do the same thing. All you have to do is like import use product state and then assign it to a constant called state, and then do a console log here, state dot product data. Okay. Now you see in so let's just also keep it like something, some log here, like in the search bar, so we get a differentiation from there. Okay, we load this and oops, yeah. So here in the search bar, you can see the data is here. So this is like the power of context API. All the code that we wrote here in the index.js, not here, yeah, in here only, in the use product state, use product dispatch, we created a context, we created the state and the dispatch from there, and now we can use this custom hooks to basically dispatch any event from anywhere within the code, and we can use the product state to use the global state from anywhere within the code. So that kind of, if you remember the diagram that I showed you, this, it solves this problem. Okay, so you can imagine like earlier, if we had to send this data, this state, I mean, whatever the product we got, if we have to send this to this particular, what was it, search bar, prop, then we have to pass props to it. And search bar is a child component of home. In the home, you will have this, sorry, not, yeah, in the home, you will have this nav bar and search bar. So you have to, and home is a child component of app. So you have to essentially pass the data first to the home, and then from home, you have to pass the prop to the search bar, although home does not require that data. So that problem gets solved now because you have this global state, and you can use the use global state, and I mean use product state and use product dispatch, and directly get access to the data and even the access to update the data in the global state. So this solves the problem. Okay, and as far as the integration with the API is concerned, you can see it from here, and nothing fancy in that, just in the service section, we got the details for the API, and we created the API. And then in the middleware section, we called this API, we wrote an asynchronous code function to call this API and then get the response. And using that response, we did something in the component. So in the next session, what we are going to do is that we will use this data to create insert like the data into the card and render the cards within this search box. Beneath this search box, we will render all the cards. Okay, and then we will start implementing the add products, card, wish list, and all those things. Okay. Okay, so do you guys have any question? I think it all went overboard for today. Oh.
Love Somendra.
Yeah.
It's
So
like in first attempt, it's not that easy for us to go everything in mind. Like we are just going through the videos multiple times, so then it's a bit understandable.
yeah. So basically, I understand. So you were confused with the code because generally when we try to follow anything, we follow a top-down approach. We start from the top and then we see what's happening at the bottom. Okay, but when we create React apps, as I already said, we follow a bottom-up approach where we start creating the smaller elements first and then we move to the top. So, so the flow here is very similar to that. So my suggestion to you would be to see this video and follow along with what I have created. Okay, and then once you create it from yourself, you'll be able to understand the flow, like how it's going, what data is going where, how the context is being used, and all those things. Okay, so that would be your assignment for tomorrow, which is to just follow along this lecture and try to create a create the context and integrate the app with the API. Okay.
Sure, Somendra.
Okay, and if there's
Okay,
a, so do you have like any questions from the previous session that we had, or even for this session? If you have, you can ask. Okay, any questions from the previous session, guys? Okay, I think there are no questions. I think in the previous session, I just created the JSX. Okay, one thing I forgot to tell you, let me just tell you right now. So if you see here, you will see that there's a warning coming up. It says invalid DOM property class. Did you mean class name? So can anybody tell me like what's this error all about? I
It is
mean,
asking that is that class means class name.
yeah. So basically we are using JSX, right? And JSX is uh, like different from the okay, there are no so many of them. JSX is different from HTML. In HTML, we used to use something called class, but here, so it will understand. I mean, the modern JSX is smart enough to understand we are referring to this class actually, but in JSX, this should be like class name. something like this. Okay. So let's do it all together. Let's find
So
class.
in the JS, it is like class only. In JSX, is it a class name?
Yeah, so not in JS, I mean in HTML.
Mhm.
It's like it's
Okay.
yeah, class name, class name, class name.
So in
Mm,
HTML also we can give class name, right? For our
no, no, no,
practice purpose.
no. In HTML, HTML is different. HTML is a different thing, and JSX is a different thing.
Okay.
So we cannot use. So this is a syntax of JSX, not HTML. That's why you cannot use that.
Mhm.
Okay. See, now the error is not coming. I mean, that warning is not there. So that was the only thing. Okay. Okay, I'll push this code. Where is it? It's stored in the workspace.